My name is Mary Hodges. I am the manager of the Craddock Branch Library, and I am co-chair of the Second Tuesday Forum Committee, along with Sue Burton. And we are very pleased to have you all here. I hope all of you got a copy of our flyer with this season's lectures on it. If you didn't, and if you didn't get one of our surveys, just wave your hand. I'd be happy to come over and pass one out to you. And we have a wonderful season planned this year, so I hope you will be back to see some more of these sessions. And now I will pass it over to Sue for the introduction of our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and welcome back, everyone. We're so glad to see you. We're very honored to have somebody representing the National Park Service at Colonial National Historical Park, Yorktown Battlefield. And I wanted to make sure that I got that all straight because there is some discrepancy between several of the places up in Yorktown, and so there's a distinction, and I wanted to make sure that you knew that. Ms. Linda Williams is actually a native of Hampton Roads, but she did spend some years away, 4 years in the Army, and then several years with a humanitarian organization in West Africa. Having already completed a bachelor's degree in political science, when she got back to the United States, she went and got a teaching license so that she could teach social studies and history. After a year of teaching, and it wasn't because she didn't enjoy it, she did, she was offered the job with the National Park Service. And as of October 14th, which is tomorrow, she will have been working at Yorktown as a National Park Ranger for 8 years. So we are very pleased to welcome Ms. Linda Ranger Williams.
I hope you don't mind. I'm going to get in front of the podium. Is that okay with you guys? Does everybody hear me all right? Okay. I'm going to try to keep the microphone close to my mouth. Okay. So yes, my name is Linda, and it is my pleasure to be here. Like Sue said, I have been working for the National Park Service for 8 years at Yorktown Battlefield, and if I have my way, I will retire there. I love telling the story of what happened at the battlefield. Now, we have thousands of visitors come every year, and I speak to many of them. And a lot of them come in the door and they really don't have a clue of what happened at Yorktown. And by the end of my tour, I think they have a good idea. So hopefully you guys will learn something today. Okay. Now, in my tour groups, this time of year, I'll, on average, have 80, 90, 100 people on my tour group. And I like to ask them, I was like, you're U.S. citizens, most of them. We do get visitors from all over the world. But if they're U.S. citizens, I ask them, tell them you should know your nation's history pretty well, right? I'm going to ask you guys that. You, being good citizens of your country, you know your nation's history pretty well, right? Oh, that's a pretty good answer. So tell me, what year did the American Revolutionary War officially begin? And I'm not trying to trick you. All right, she says 1776. Do you agree with her? All right, 1771 over here. He says 1775. Okay, does anybody else want to take a guess? All right, you can see I'm getting different answers. Now, how many of you would honestly say you really don't know? Raise your hand. Now, if you don't raise your hand, you're telling me you know. Well, a lot of times I'll ask people, and I'll have a group of 100 people, and they'll be very vocal about it, and quite often I will not hear the correct answer, but I did hear today. The American Revolutionary War officially began on April 19th, 1775, at Lexington, Concord, Massachusetts. Now, this is going to be a little bit easier because the answer is right behind me here. What year do you think the battle at Yorktown took place? 1781. The American Revolutionary War had been going on for 6 years. In fact, it had just entered into its 7th year. Now, to put that into some perspective, America fought in World War II for a total of 4 years. But the American Revolutionary War, of course, was taking place on American soil, and in 1781, after 6 years of fighting, it was not going well for the American cause of independence. Now, sometimes today, some Americans can take it a little for granted that we live in a country called the United States of America with the kind of Constitution it has. But in 1781, even the basics of America's independence was by no means guaranteed. Ooh, I gotta get this set up. All right, I've kind of lost it. Was not guaranteed. The British had control of the entire state of Georgia, which would be down here. They had control of Charleston, South Carolina, and they were tearing through that state. And they had control of New York City. And George Washington was outside of New York City with the Continental Army, really wanting to attack the British there, but simply not strong enough to do so. In fact, by this point of the war, the Continental Congress was completely bankrupt, so the Continental Army wasn't getting any of their basics. They weren't getting food, clothing, or that all-important pay. Now, General George Washington always struggled throughout the entire Revolutionary War to keep that Continental Army supplied, but by 1781, after 6 years of fighting, the Continental Congress was pretty much bankrupt, and the Continental Army wasn't getting any of their basic supplies. And because of this, Washington was having a hard time finding recruits to join the Continental Army. I mean, who wants to join an army where you're not going to have pay in your hand, food in your belly, or shoes on your feet, and you could have a very fast cannonball flying towards your head? I mean, I know I, for one, wouldn't have been rushing off to enlist in such an army. Also, just within the year before, one of the great and very famous heroes of the American Continental Army, you probably heard of him, an American General Benedict Arnold, had become a traitor. He was now fighting for the British, and he had a British army here in Virginia just causing all kinds of havoc here. Things were so bad in 1781 that George Washington wrote these words in the month of April. He said, "We are at the end of our tether. Now or never, our deliverance must come." And basically what Washington was saying with those words was, we're getting ready to lose this war unless something very big happens, and something very big happens soon. Well, within 6 months of Washington writing such desperate words outside of New York City, that something big was going to happen at Yorktown. Now the French, they had decided to help the American patriots, but not because they supported the American patriot cause to overthrow the tyranny of King George III of Great Britain. No, France had a king itself at that time. They didn't want to support a revolution against a king. But France and Great Britain had been fighting each other off and on for nearly 100 years by this point, and the French saw the American Revolutionary War as a wonderful way to possibly weaken some of Great Britain's power in the world. So as soon as France thought that it was advantageous for them to do so, they decided to openly align themselves with the American patriots. And in 1778, France declared war against Great Britain. But from the point that France declared war against Great Britain to the point that the American patriots saw any real tangible help from them, took nearly 2 years. But finally, 5,000 French troops came over from France under the command of a French General Rochambeau. They landed up at Newport, Rhode Island, and they awaited there waited there to see how George Washington would use them. And like I told you, Washington was outside of New York City, really wanting to attack the British there. So he was like, great, the French have finally arrived. Now maybe we can do a joint operation to do just that. Now, of course, the British, they were here fighting as well, and they had arguably the best army and the best navy in the world at that time. And they had come over thinking the war in America would be a pretty quick war for them. Well, it had dragged on for the British as well. In fact, the British had gotten pretty frustrated because the war reached a virtual stalemate in the northeastern colonies. So the British just changed the overall strategy of the war, and they moved the war into the southern colonies. Now, this isn't the clearest slide here. So you had a General Henry Clinton. Now, he was the overall commander of all the British forces in North America, and he decided to take 8,000 British troops from New York City, and he decided to sail all the way down to Charleston, South Carolina with those troops, with his second in command, General Cornwallis, in order to lay siege against that city. Now, he left enough troops in New York to keep George Washington preoccupied. But inside of Charleston, there was an American army of 5,000 men under the command of a General Benjamin Lincoln. No relation to the future President Abraham Lincoln, and no, Clinton wasn't related to Clinton. But after nearly a 2-month siege, that American army at Charleston was forced to surrender. Now, back then, when one army defeated another army, they'd usually let the defeated army surrender with full honors of war. And what that meant is the defeated army would be allowed to march out with their flags high and flying in the wind. They could play lively tunes as they marched out. A lot of times, they could keep their weapons. And sometimes if a soldier just said, hey, I promise I won't fight you guys anymore, they'd parole them. They'd let them go. But the British didn't view the Americans as an honorable enemy. I mean, they did see them as being traitors against their king and country. So the British didn't let that 5,000 American man army surrender those full honors of war. That American army had to march out of Charleston with their flags down and furled. They were not allowed to play lively tunes. They had to give up their weapons, and every single one of the Continental soldiers were taken as prisoners of war. And unfortunately, many of them were crammed into prison ships where the conditions were absolutely hell on earth. And many of them, in fact, the majority of them on those prison ships, ended up dying of diseases. Now, the Americans were not going to forget how that army was treated at Charleston, and I tell you about it because what happened at Charleston was going to play a part in what happened at Yorktown later. So now the British got control of Charleston. Lieutenant General Clinton was pleased. He went back to New York, but he left General Cornwallis with the army to try to win back the Carolinas for King George III in Great Britain. And Cornwallis took his army through South Carolina, and he had a lot of tremendous success. But then he started having some setbacks. He had defeated a place called Kings Mountain, South Carolina. Then a few months later, another defeated a place called Cowpens. But Cornwallis didn't let that slow him down. He raced into North Carolina to try to capture an American army, and they finally met at a place called Guilford Courthouse. And the battle there was an intense one. And Cornwallis technically won there, but it was a costly victory. He lost about a quarter of his army, and now he was really too weak to continue the Carolina campaign. So Cornwallis withdrew to the coast of North Carolina at Wilmington. And it is there that Cornwallis decided to change the overall strategy of all the British forces in North America without bothering to tell anybody else about it. He always believed that Virginia was the key, and he was now convinced until Virginia fell, it was pointless for him to continue that Carolina campaign. So, Without waiting for permission from his commanding officer in New York, Clinton, Cornwallis went ahead, packed up what remained of his army. He marched into Virginia. He took over Benedict Arnold's army. Benedict Arnold went back to New York, and Cornwallis proceeded to try to conquer Virginia. But there was already a tiny Continental army here under the command of one of Washington's very favorites, a young Frenchman who had been helping the American Revolution since quite early at his own expense. He was very wealthy. He was a general in the American Continental Army. In fact, he is the youngest general to ever serve in any of the United States Armed Forces. He was 19 when he became a general. At this point, he was around 23 years old, a young General Lafayette. And Cornwallis chased Lafayette's army around Virginia, could never quite catch him, and his army was tired. Now, meanwhile, Clinton in New York was furious with Cornwallis for coming into Virginia without waiting for his permission. But he didn't do like a normal commanding officer would do and say, "Hey, you, get back in the Carolinas like I ordered you to." Because even though Clinton outranked Cornwallis in military rank, I gotta have this microphone. Cornwallis had a much higher social standing than Clinton in England. He was an earl, and he had all the high political connections. So because of this, Clinton was a little intimidated by Cornwallis, and Clinton sent Cornwallis wishy-washy orders. He told him to do one thing, then he changed his mind and told him to do something else, and one of those things was to come down here to Portsmouth to load troops on ships to send up to New York. But then he ordered them to do something else. He told them, "No, don't do that. Take those troops off those ships, and you need to find a British naval base somewhere in Virginia." Now, there is a lot that happened, and I don't have 6 hours to give you a talk. I'm sure you appreciate if I didn't attempt to, because believe me, I could do a 6-hour talk easy. But finally, Cornwallis did do reconnaissance, and he decided to set up that British naval base at Yorktown. And Cornwallis' decision to set up at Yorktown was going to cost Great Britain its 13 American colonies and lead to the birth of this nation. Now, I had to give you that background information because I never know, how much my audience knows. So now we're all on the same page. You know why Cornwallis is here. So, why did Cornwallis pick Yorktown for a British naval base? Now, Yorktown lies on the York River, and in relation to this map of Yorktown, if you look down that way 7 miles, you'll be seeing the Chesapeake Bay. And as you know, 23 miles from Yorktown, right around this area, the Chesapeake Bay empties out to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, this York River is a very deep river. At points, it's 90 feet deep. It's very deep, and it tends to stay deep close to the shoreline, and you need that to support large battleships. Also, not far from Yorktown, there's a large bridge that crosses the York River, known as the Coleman Bridge. And that bridge, of course, was not there in 1781. Okay. But where that bridge crosses the York River narrows quite considerably, then widens back out again, and that would protect the ships from storms and also make it easier to defend them. And you see, Yorktown lies on these predominantly on these really high bluffs. They're about 50 to 70 feet high above the York River. And that would make any kind of amphibious attack against Yorktown pretty difficult to do. And from here, a British ship would be able to sail out to the Chesapeake Bay, then up any of the rivers of Virginia and attack the enemy at will. So for those reasons, Cornwallis picked Yorktown for that British naval base. But Yorktown had 2 very big weaknesses. It was very vulnerable to an attack from an approaching land army that approached Yorktown from the south and the southeast, because there are these very deep ravines where a land army could approach virtually unharassed. Now, if you come visit the battlefield, you do the battlefield tour ride. That part of the battlefield is really beautiful back there, but you'll see those deep ravines I'm talking about. And also, Yorktown was very vulnerable to a naval blockade. But Cornwallis wasn't too worried about either of those threats. As far as he was concerned, the only land army anywhere near him at the time was Lafayette's tiny Continental Army. He wasn't too worried about him. And for 6 years, the British Navy pretty much had complete control of the Northern American waters, and Cornwallis had no reason to believe they were going to lose that, so he set up at Yorktown. Now, meanwhile, George Washington was still outside of New York City, and he was still wanting to attack the British there. He was pretty set on that. But he was a good general. He did know Cornwallis had moved into Virginia with a large army, so he did make some contingency plans to come down here. But George Washington wanted to attack the British in New York City. So he was making plans to do so. He started to communicate with the French army that was still up at Newport, Rhode Island. He began to have conferences with the French General Rochambeau, and they were making plans to attack New York City. But while they were doing this, they got a message from hundreds of miles away, from way down south, from the Caribbean islands, from the West Indies, from a French admiral, Admiral de Grasse. Now remember, back then they didn't have email, text messaging, Twitter, Facebook, smartphones, and smartwatches. They sent messages by the fastest ship they could find over water, and believe me, it quite often was not fast, or even reliable. But Admiral de Grasse sent a message saying, hey, and I don't think he started it with hey either, okay? But I'm down here in the West Indies. I've got 28 ships of the line with me. That means 28 large battleships, plus all his support ships. And he said, I'm under orders to sail north to assist you however you need me to. Now, when Washington got that message, he got excited. Because he's like, great, I have the French army here to help. Now I will even have a large navy I can use. Now we finally can really strike a blow against the British in New York City. So the news of the French fleet sailing north, the French army marched down from Newport, Rhode Island, joined Washington's army outside of New York City, and they continued to make plans to attack there. But after a while, they got another message from the French Admiral de Grasse, and this time he said, no, I decided it's best not to bring the French fleet all the way up to New York City. There's too many sandbars in the harbor, and plus I only have a limited time I'm going to be north to help you during hurricane season. So I decided it would be far better to bring the French fleet to the Chesapeake Bay instead. Now, when Washington received news of that message, he really did get quite frustrated and quite upset, because now all his plans to attack New York City were going to have to be scrapped. But to Washington's credit, within 5 days of getting this message that ruined all his plans to attack New York City, Washington set into motion a new plan. He now realized that Yorktown was probably going to be the last great hope for any significant victory against the British. So he decided to march that French army all the way down here from New York City in an attempt to try to surround Cornwallis and his army. Now this was going to be extremely risky what Washington wanted to do. First of all, he had to get those armies around New York City the whole time fooling Clinton and the British there. They were going to attack them, because if the British figured out too soon he was actually marching his armies down south, they could have come out and attacked him, and that would not have been good. Also, Cornwallis was here in Yorktown. If he figured it out too soon there's this big army marching down here, he could have packed up his army, escaped into the Carolinas, and that would have left Washington between two places with nowhere to go. And what absolutely had to happen is the French fleet had to get control of the Chesapeake Bay. If the French fleet had not gotten control of the Chesapeake Bay, it would not have mattered if Washington had somehow marched down here with 100,000 troops, because Cornwallis would have always been able to escape by sea. So one of the most, and I actually say, the most important naval battle in this country's history by far, even more than Midway of World War II, it occurred right outside the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. It's known as the Battle of the Capes, among other names. There was not one single American sailor involved in this naval battle. There were 40,000 sailors involved, French and British, and the battle didn't even last that long. But that naval battle was going to directly impact the future and the fate of this country. And what is so funny is there's hardly an American that knows a thing about it. So Admiral de Grasse, he knew exactly when he wanted to come to the Chesapeake Bay. He got much needed troops, supplies, and much needed money loaded aboard his French ships, and he sailed the entire West Indies French fleet north from the Caribbean. They arrived in the Chesapeake Bay on August the 29th. They lowered their anchors and they started offloading those troops and supplies. Now, the British had an admiral up in New York City, Admiral Graves, and he had received word that, yes, a French fleet had sailed north from the Caribbean, but he had no idea that it was the entire West Indies French fleet. The British never thought the French would do something crazy and bold like that. He only thought it was a small part of it, and he wasn't too sure where it was heading. But he had just received very reliable intelligence that another small French fleet of 8 ships of the line had recently left Newport, Rhode Island, and he knew that French fleet was heading to the Chesapeake Bay with a lot of artillery on board. So the British, they got their fleet together. They had 19 ships of the line. They thought that would be plenty. Admiral Graves was the admiral in charge, and they raced down here to look for that small French fleet. And on September the 5th, 1781, the British fleet rounded the corner, looked into the Chesapeake Bay, and instead of seeing 8 French ships of the line, they saw 28 French ships of the line. And the French, who were still busy offloading supplies, some of their ships didn't even have some of their officers on board. When they looked out of the bay into the Atlantic and they finally realized that was a British fleet, the French went into panic mode. They ended up cutting anchors, and most of the French fleet tried to race out of the Chesapeake Bay in absolute chaos. And if Admiral Graves, the British admiral, he had not been such a by-the-book admiral, if he would have aggressively attacked that French fleet when they were trying to get out of the bay so disorganized, he probably would have tore them up piecemeal, and I would not be speaking to you today as a public servant with this current form of the government of the United States of America. But Admiral Graves, for many reasons, was by the book, so he had his British fleet line up in the line of battle. And by doing so, it allowed the French fleet enough time to be able to get out of the Chesapeake Bay, get organized themselves, and then they lined up in the line of battle. And then Admiral Graves communicated with his fleet by flags, and he sent up a flag ordering the British fleet to hold the line. And that means pretty much stay the course you're on. But then mistakenly, underneath that, another flag went up with a contradictory order telling the British fleet to move towards the French and attack. 2 flags up at the same time with contradictory orders sent confusion in the British fleet. And I can picture some admirals under Admiral Graves just going crazy because he knew he was messing this up. Well, all the confusion made it where only the first half of the British fleet could get close enough to engage the first half of the French fleet, but when they did, they went at it. It was an intense naval battle, as they usually were. They were very brutal. There were hundreds of casualties on both sides. Several ships were damaged, a couple quite severely, but it only lasted 2.5 hours. Because when the sun set, they pulled away from each other, and then they just drifted south within eyesight of each other for several days. And admirals under Admiral Graves begged him, will you be more aggressive, do something? But Admiral Graves just would not. So after a couple more days, the French Admiral de Grasse knew that that other small French fleet had probably arrived in the bay from Newport. He knew they were coming. So he raced his French fleet back towards the bay. The British chased them in, but now there were 36 French ships of the line, and there was nothing that outnumbered Admiral Graves could do but take his damaged British fleet and go back, sail back to New York. So, for that critical moment in history where it was absolutely necessary for the American cause to independence, the French fleet managed to get control of the Chesapeake Bay. And only because the French fleet were able to get control of the Chesapeake Bay could what happened here shortly after happen. If they had not, we would have had a very different history, ladies and gentlemen. Some historians say that Admiral Graves, just from that 2.5-hour naval battle, that it was he who lost the 13 colonies for Great Britain. Now that's how important that battle was, and I challenge any one of you to ever find a Royal British Navy ship that was ever named Graves. The United States Navy has had 3 ships named after the French Admiral de Grasse. They've had a couple ships named after Lafayette. They've had 5 ships named after Yorktown. And Star Trek has had 2 ships named after Yorktown. All right. So now Cornwallis, he had moved into the village of Yorktown in the early part of August 1781, August 1st. He had over 5,000 British troops with him. He had over 2,000 German troops with him. And what do you think the locals in Yorktown did when Cornwallis and that big army marched in? Most of them fled. So keep that in mind when the bombardment begins. But he got here in the early part of August, and as you all know, this part of Virginia in August gets very hot and humid. And they did not have air conditioning. So they were in no hurry to do any kind of heavy physical labor. They were not rushing to finish their defensive positions around Yorktown as fast as they normally would, because it was so uncomfortable for them. Plus, they didn't feel too threatened anyway. But you can imagine the shock and horror that Cornwallis and those here with him must have felt when on the morning of August 30th, they looked down the York River, and way off in the distance, they suddenly noticed there were French ships there. And we know from a German officer's journal, at that point it no longer mattered how hot and humid it was. They started getting very busy working on their defenses. And what they were going to do is build very high and wide earthworks all the way around the village of Yorktown to defend them from cannonballs and mortar shells and stuff. Now, if you come to Yorktown Battlefield, the earthworks around the visitor center are original 1781 British defensive positions. Now, there's been modern-day shoring up, and there was some Civil War expansion, but they're still mostly 1781. I didn't believe that until a few years ago we found a cannonball in them, and an archaeologist came out and proved it to me. But they built these earthworks all the way around Yorktown, like I said, to defend them against cannons. And they started scrounging up every piece of artillery they could get their hands on. They were taking cannons from their support ships out in the York River, and the British managed to come up with 244 pieces of artillery, which is an incredibly large amount. The only thing is they didn't have too many of the big boys, but they could still ruin your day if you got too close. So they were going to have what they did have facing all around Yorktown, but a lot of it they're going to put on their defensive positions facing south, because they wanted to make the life miserable of anyone who would dare try to come down and attack them and lay siege to them. And of course, Washington, the American and the French army were marching down here from New York in order to do just that. They're going to want to come, surround Yorktown, dig their own siege lines, move incredibly heavy artillery pieces up, and start firing into Yorktown, making the life miserable for Cornwallis and those with them. Now, the Americans and the French, they only had about 130 artillery pieces, but they had a whole heck of a lot more than the big boys, and that was going to make all the difference in the world. The British had cannonballs like this. The Americans and the French had cannonballs this size. So it was going to make a big difference. And the only reason they could bring the heavy artillery is because the French fleet got control of the Chesapeake, and they could ship them down. Okay. All right. So now, the British were rushing to finish those defensive positions around Yorktown, and meanwhile, Washington had to march that American, that French army down here. And the first thing they had to do is get around New York City. The whole time, fooling Clinton and the British there, they was going to attack them. And Washington did this pretty brilliantly. First of all, he didn't let any of his enlisted soldiers and hardly any of his officers know that he was actually marching them down here to Yorktown. As far as they were concerned, they thought they were getting ready to attack New York City. Now, Washington did this for a lot of reasons, but the main reason being, of course, is he didn't want word leaking out to the British of his true intentions. Also, Washington sent out a bunch of messengers on horseback with absolutely fake messages. So much for him in that cherry tree legend. You know, I cannot tell a lie. Oh yeah, he could. He hoped the British would capture some of them. They did, and the British were like, oh, we got great intelligence here. It looks like New York's definitely his target. And the French army used the age-old tactic of setting up fake encampments around New York City, and all this worked. It thoroughly convinced the British General Clinton that an attack on New York City was imminent. So the American and the French army, they crossed the Hudson north of New York City, then they marched down along the side of it, and it got to the point where either they were going to turn to attack New York or keep going down south. And of course, Washington kept marching his armies down south, and his own troops were like, whoa, we're going to Virginia. They were absolutely shocked. But unfortunately for Clinton, he was so fooled that Washington was going to attack him at New York City that he didn't realize Washington had marched those armies down south until it was too late. And by the time he figured it out, Washington had gotten far enough away where Clinton couldn't do anything immediately about it, except for maybe wave bye-bye. So Washington marched his armies down through New Jersey, down through Philadelphia, and on the other side of Philadelphia, Washington received the incredible good news that the French fleet had actually managed to get control of the Chesapeake Bay. Now think about that. Washington left New York City without even knowing if one of the most critical parts of the plan was even going to succeed. This is how risky Washington's plan was. So when Washington got this incredible good news about the French fleet, Washington, who always carried himself with dignity and self-control when he was out in public, it was very important to him to always appear in control. I don't know if you know anybody like that. But sorry about that. But when Washington received this incredible good news about the French fleet, Washington just lost it. He started jumping up and down, jumping around, waving the message. His officers in the French thought he had lost his mind, because they had never seen Washington behave like that. But apparently Washington could help it, because with that news of the success of the French fleet, he realized for the first time that his very risky plan might actually have some chance of working, and apparently he was overjoyed by that. Now, some people ask, why did Cornwallis just stay in Yorktown? I mean, he knew the French fleet had gotten control of the Chesapeake, and by this point, he knew there was this big army marching down here. Why did Cornwallis just stay in Yorktown? Well, Cornwallis, he had made the breakout plan and finalized one. He was going to take a very risky move to try to make a breakout through Lafayette's army before Lafayette got any more reinforcements. But right when he was seriously thinking about doing that, he started getting all these messages from his commander in New York, Clinton. Now, Clinton could get messages through the blockade. And Clinton sent Cornwallis a message basically saying, look, don't worry, I'm on my way to rescue you. I'm going to have the British Navy with me. I'm going to have 5,000 British troops on board, and we're going to be there any day to relieve you. And he kept sending Cornwallis those reassurances. So Cornwallis was like, okay, help's on the way. He still had faith in the British Navy. He thought help was coming fairly quickly, so he decided it was best to stay at Yorktown, so he stayed. Now, the American and the French army, they marched down to the top of the Chesapeake Bay, and it's there most of those troops and supplies started embarking on French ships, boats, and barges. Thank you, French Navy. They were ended up sailing all the way down the Chesapeake Bay, into the James River and up the James River. They were going to all float around the Jamestown area, and then they were going to march into Williamsburg. Well, this was going to take a little while to do, so George Washington took this opportunity to ride over to his home in Northern Virginia at Mount Vernon. Now, George Washington had not been home for over 6 years. So he took General Rochambeau. They only spent a couple days at Mount Vernon. Then they rode on horseback all the way down to Williamsburg. They had a reunion with Lafayette. They were very close. And they awaited the arrival of all the troops. All the troops arrived in Williamsburg by September the 26th. From the point that they left New York on August 19th to the point that they all arrived in Williamsburg took just under 6 weeks. It was an incredible logistical feat pulled off here, and I remind you, in the summertime heat. But Washington wasted no time. 2 days later, he had a march out of Williamsburg. They arrived at Yorktown on September the 28th, the same day, and they started encircling Yorktown, setting up encampments about a mile from the village itself. And they had troops on the other side of the York River around Gloucester County as well. And what did they start getting ready to dig their own siege lines? And it's a pretty lengthy process to build those siege lines. I'm not going to go into that. But they were finally ready, and they decided to dig the first siege line on the night of October the 6th. You were going to have 1,500 French and American troops with picks and shovels digging. You were going to be making a lot of noise. And somehow the Americans and the French wanted to dig this first siege line without the British here knowing they're out there digging. Because if the British knew they were out there digging and where, they'd fire everything they could at them and probably kill a lot of them. And that, of course, is never good. So there's times throughout history, very, very often, where weather will play a critical part. It happens all the time. There used to be a show on the Weather Channel called When Weather Changed History. Now, a lot of times weather will work against you. A lot of times weather will work for you. I had to deal with it all the time at work. George Washington had weather go both ways throughout the war. But weather played a critical part at Yorktown a few times. And one of the times was with the digging of that first siege line. It had been lovely weather. But on October the 5th, it began to rain quite heavily. We experienced something like that recently. And it continued to rain into October the 6th and into the night of October 6th. And what that rain did, first, the clouds covered the moon, which was bright enough to have been a factor in the nighttime dig. Second, the rain made the ground easier to dig. And third, it rained hard enough where it helped to mute the sound of all those tools while they were out there digging. So on the night of October 6th, they snuck up to dig, and they were scared. And they started digging that first siege line as quickly as they could. And because the ground was easier to dig, they basically completed it in one night, and the British never knew they were out there doing it. So when the British looked out at first light and suddenly saw a siege line in front of them, they must have did some sort of collective gulp. They knew they were in trouble. Now, the siege line didn't go all the way around Yorktown because to the right of Yorktown there's a very deep ravine. So the French did build some positions right on the York River, but this siege line was about 850 yards from Yorktown. The Americans had this half, and the French had this half. And they perfected it, strengthened it, moved all that incredibly heavy artillery up, and they were ready to begin firing on October the 9th. Now, what's today? The 13th, right? Okay. So at 3 p.m., on October the 9th, the French were the first to open fire in Yorktown from the far left position, but then 2 hours later, George Washington himself lit the first American cannon from the far right position, and it is said, now notice how I'm saying that, it is said, that the cannonball George Washington fired, that it went into Yorktown, crashed through a couple of buildings, went into a building where some British officers were still trying to eat above ground, and it killed Cornwallis as commissary general and severely wounded an officer with him. And from that point on, the Americans and the French just bombarded Yorktown. It was going to be an intense bombardment, nonstop, 24/7, averaging 1,700 cannonballs and mortar shell bombs a day. Sometimes a day much more intense than others, and that was not including what the British were managing to fire back. And when you visit Yorktown today, it's usually pretty peaceful out there. We'll have some jets fly over occasionally. But back then, they described the intensity of the bombardment was so much, they said it was as if the whole peninsula was shaking from the thunder of all those cannons. And one American doctor described how at night, you'd see the mortar shells that came in from a high trajectory of fuses. They were exploding bombs. He said, you see them raining down on Yorktown. He said it was like a meteor shower. Now, it must have been an incredible sight, but it must have been pretty bad for anybody in Yorktown. But even from that range, the Americans and the French knocked out some British cannons, and they quickly felt like, you know what, we can move up even closer. So like a boa constrictor, they wanted to put the squeeze on Cornwallis. So on the night of October 11th, they decided to dig a second siege line 400 yards closer. And again, they dug it at night, they launched diversion attacks, the British seemed to fire everywhere except where they were digging. Washington was incredulous. And again, they got it done in one night. They moved the cannons 400 yards closer, and they started pounding Yorktown even harder. But there were two British defensive positions that stood in the way of them being able to complete that second siege line, and they're known as redoubts, redoubts 9 and redoubts 10. Now, a redoubt is a heavily defended earthen fort, and the British soldiers and their allies inside of them defending them were the hardcore soldiers, and the Americans and the French had to capture them. So on the night of October 14th, tomorrow night, 400 of the best French troops were going to try to overrun redoubt number 9, and 400 of the best American troops were going to try to overrun redoubt number 10. And the Americans were told that they were going to attack Redoubt 10 with unloaded muskets just with fixed bayonets. And you're like, what? I'm sure they weren't happy about that. They didn't want them accidentally shooting each other in the confusion of a nighttime attack. And they were commanded by that gentleman on your $10 bill. You know who he is? Everybody? Anybody? Anyone? Alexander Hamilton, future Secretary Treasurer under Washington, a major reason we ended up with a federal-type government. So the man on your $10 bill commanded the attack on Redoubt 10 in the 10th month of the year, which was captured in 10 minutes. 10, 10, 10, and 10. And Alexander Hamilton was placed on the $10 bill, not for that reason. Okay. All right, I will be done in 5 minutes. Okay, maybe 6, maybe 7. Okay. Now, the French, they had a much harder time capturing Redoubt 9. They took loaded muskets and they paid a price. They had a hard time getting through. It was dark, confusing, so they were accidentally shooting some of their own. So they had a lot more casualties, but they finally captured Redoubt 9 in 30 minutes. So now, can you imagine 30 minutes of that type of fighting? So now Cornwallis was pretty much surrounded, and the Allies had troops on the other side of the York River as well. And he did something no commanding officer ever wants to do, and I haven't quite got to surrender yet. He decided to leave behind his sick and wounded troops. And believe me, he had a lot that were particularly sick. He was going to try to take his troops that were able and try to sneak them across the York River where narrows by boat to join the thousands he had right across from there at Gloucester Point. He was going to try to make a desperation attempt at a punch-out escape north. So on the night of October 16th and into the morning of the 17th, they started sneaking those troops across by boat. And they managed to get about 1,000 across, but again, weather intervened. A terrible storm came up, scattered and damaged all his boats. And now Cornwallis could no longer escape. So for the sake of his troops, we cannot begin to imagine how horrible this bombardment must have been for him. Cornwallis finally realized he had no choice but to offer to surrender. So on the morning of the 17th, the drummer came up on the earthworks, beating for a parley, and with an officer beside him waving a handkerchief, and they were very brave because cannonballs were bouncing all over the place. And the British, the Americans said if they had not seen the bright red jacket of that officer through all the thick smoke, they would have never heard that drummer beating for a parley. But when they saw the officer's jacket, the Americans and the French silenced the cannons, and it got quiet for the first time in 8 days. And then they could hear that drummer beating for a parley, and the Americans said it was one of the most incredible sounds they ever heard. And Cornwallis sent a message pretty much saying, I'm paraphrasing a bit, that he would like a cessation of hostilities for 24 hours while he thought about things. And Washington wasn't about to give him that long. He said, you tell me he has 2 hours. What's he going to do? So Cornwallis had no choice. So they sent commissioner officers over to the Morehouse on this map. It would be here, stop E on the Battlefield Drive. And they spent hours negotiating the terms of surrender there. And it took hours because the British were fully expecting to get full honors of war. But the Americans were not about to let them have it. They said, no. You're going to get the same terms of surrender that you gave that American army at Charleston, South Carolina. You're going to march out with your flags down and furled. You're giving up your weapons, and you're all going to be taken as prisoners of war. And the British tried to fight on that, but the Americans were not going to bend. So the British had to surrender under those terms, and they didn't like it. So on the day of surrender, October 19th, coming Monday, come visit us at the battlefield. On October 19th, Cornwallis said he was sick. And he had his second in command, Brigadier General Charles O'Hara, lead the British and the German troops out of Yorktown to surrender. They marched out of Yorktown till they got to this area, and today on the battlefield there's a national cemetery there, it's a Civil War cemetery, with a lot of unknown soldiers buried there. And they put that cemetery there because they knew on that ground Washington, Rochambeau, and them stood. And that's where the official sword surrendering took place. And there's a painting of that ceremony in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. So they had a quick ceremony there. Then the British and the German troops marched down to surrender field. They laid down all their weapons, and thus the siege at Yorktown ended. 5 days later, who was racing down the coast with the British Navy? With 5,000 troops on board Clinton and Admiral Graves, they got a message by boat saying, too late. Cornwallis has already surrendered to Yorktown. Nearly 1/3 of the British forces in North America here at Yorktown. So all Clinton and Graves could do was take that British fleet and go back to New York City. They've been delayed by contrary winds. So this was the last major battle of the American Revolution, the siege at Yorktown. Now, yes, there were very minor skirmishes that occurred shortly after between American patriots and American loyalists. And by now it had become a world war. You had Spain involved, France involved, the Netherlands involved. It seemed like everybody had something against Great Britain. So because of that, the peace treaty was going to take 2 years to negotiate and finalize because you had all those nations involved. It was going to be very complex. And those other nations still had to duke it out elsewhere with Great Britain. But Yorktown was the battle that won the American Revolution. And remember, just 6 months before this, George Washington had been in such desperation that he had written those words saying, "We are at the end of our tether. We're getting ready to lose this war unless something very big happens." And within 6 months of Washington writing such desperate words outside of New York City, events remarkably aligned themselves where that something big happened at Yorktown. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you live very close to a very special place in America's history. You live at dear Yorktown, where the likes of George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Lafayette, where people from several different nations converged on the village of Yorktown to determine the fate of an independent America. And every year on July 4th, what do Americans celebrate? Just don't say the 4th of July. What do we celebrate? The signing of the Declaration of Independence, where in 1776, after 1 year of war, America officially declared its independence from Great Britain with a remarkable document, particularly that second paragraph that began with these famous words, saying, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Now, we know in America's history we have stumbled on that one. We have made horrendous mistakes. We've had incredible successes, and as a nation, we are still working out what those ideals are going to mean to us. But those would have just been beautiful words on a beautifully written piece of paper if what happened at Yorktown had not happened. Because just in 1776, America declared its independence, but it was not until October 1781 that independence became real at Yorktown. 15 more seconds. 1607, Great Britain set that first permanent North America English colony at Jamestown years before Pilgrim Rock and Plymouth Rock. And then 23 miles away and 174 years later, Great Britain lost its 13 colonies at Yorktown. If you come visit Yorktown, you'll be standing on the ground where America won its independence, and you could say it truly was born. It is my pleasure. I absolutely love telling the story. I don't know if we have enough time for questions. A couple of minutes. If anybody has any questions, I hope I can answer them for you. I do want to say that Yorktown is quite often ranked in the top 5 most influential battles in world history. In fact, a gentleman wrote a book in the last 10 years basically titled The 100 Most Influential Battles in World History. He ranked Yorktown #1. But he was an American. So you'll have people fight you on that. Does anybody have any questions? Did I cover it all good for you? Can I send you a quiz in 6 months, see how you do? No questions? I'm all yours. Yes, ma'am.
Well, mine's not a question, but I could sit and listen to you all day long.
Thank you very much.
Besides, students, it's nice to see how passionate and knowledgeable you are of all of that. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. She said she could listen to me all day. Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's an incredible story. Yes.
I think the thing that is most incredible is how they sent messages.
Yes.
And was this in any way, I guess we've heard all the messages in so many hymns of women, and was this part of that, or was it just with the military?
She's just incredible how they sent messages and how they got through and what techniques they used. They used every trick in the book to get messages through. Now, this is one of the times Yorktown, you see their French and the Americans were communicating over water hundreds of miles, you know, sending messages over water, and everything came together. And I don't mention it on my tour, but the British were sending messages back and forth too, but they had all kinds of problems. They had ships getting sunk, ships getting captured, ships just going too slow. So everything came together for the French and the Americans at the Siege of Yorktown. But it is incredible. Like I said, they didn't have email back then. Yes, ma'am.
So if I visit Yorktown today, I know you mentioned the earthworks, the redoubts, and the siege lines. What are extant right now, then, that we can actually see?
All right, so you're wanting to know what still is original around Yorktown. Now, the earthworks around the visitor center are original earthworks. And there are some actual original Civil War earthworks. There was a Civil War siege. I'm not going into that in the woods. But the Allied siege lines are reconstructions. Washington had them flattened. So they're based on archaeology and they're based on maps. So they're very accurately placed. Redoubts 9 and 10 are reconstructions. We have 13 cannons that are specifically were captured at Yorktown. 2 are in the museum, and 11 are at Surrender Field in a pavilion. We have some artifacts. I know we're not the Victory Center, which is a Virginia-run museum, which they're doing a big remodeling. Our visitor center is from the 1950s and the 1970s. In some ways that does show, but we're hoping in the next 2 years to have some remodeling and more exhibits out. Anybody else? Are we done? Okay. All right, well, thank you guys. It was absolutely my pleasure to be out here, and thank you for having me.
I think we can all agree that if we had a history teacher that was as enthusiastic and gave us that kind of information in that kind of way, that we all would have been history majors and we would know a whole lot more about what was going on during the American Revolution and anything afterwards. So thank you so very much for coming. This was her day off, so just, obviously she loves her job and it shows. And we want to thank you. And please, everybody, remember on November 10th, we have another historic talk from Christopher Kolakowski, who's over at the MacArthur Museum, and he's going to talk about the liberation of the Philippines. And for those of you that have an interest in World War II, particularly the Pacific Theater, I think you'll find it very, very interesting. And thank you for coming. Good to see you.